USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, November 1st, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger along with Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. There's some teams that have been doing pretty well, but nobody's talked about them that much, and we haven't talked about them all that much either. At 7-1, we have Omaha. I think they're going to come into the top 10 this week. They had a split with Lake State, but then swept Maine, Alaska, and LIU. How good is Mike Gabinet's team?
You know, they're beating the teams that they're playing, and that's the most important thing. I think that you don't know exactly who you're going to have in your schedule in terms of how difficult it's going to be, but they're winning the games. They dropped their first game, against Lake State, but then they've come back with 7 in a row. They're going to have 2 more at home this week against Miami. And they could be 9-1 when they head in and play St. Cloud State potentially next weekend. I mean, that you're talking about the number 1 team in the country against a team that's at that point is 9-1-0. That's a pretty impressive slate there. I think that Omaha has been able to put together. Again, it goes to Derek. We talk about it. You can only win the games that are in front of you.
Yeah. And that's, I think the one thing that is when you look at your schedule, you kind of, as a coach, you go, we should be here. And, you're going to have one that you lose. And the interesting thing about their one loss, it wasn't overtime. So the pairwise is not as effective. So they're going to have a high pairwise because they are winning their games. And, you look at 8 at home, 10 at home, you probably hope to go because you're going to have some slip ups. Somebody's going to give you a game. Somebody's going to do that. And they beat some teams pretty handily. But you probably would look at that going, if we could be 8-2 coming through those 10 straight home games, then let's go back there. 10 straight home games to start the year. Anything below 8-2, you're probably a little disappointed.
Well, and as they get into NCHC play, it's going to be very interesting to watch how they compete for the top half of the league. You tend to think of North Dakota, Minnesota, Duluth, Denver, St. Cloud as kind of the top 4 perennially in that league, but Omaha and Western Michigan are going to be battling for that too. We'll have to see how they stand up against that. I mean, they squeezed into that last year in the shortened season.
Yeah, and their next 4 non-conference games are all on the road, so they will have to. They're going to have a tough trip up to Alaska Fairbanks, and then over New Year's they're going to have to go to St. Lawrence, who's played some pretty good hockey. So you're going to see them have to I guess. Test and see what kind of team they do really have on the road once you get in the NCHC play.
Another team that is off to a good start, losing its opener to Arizona State, but winning the next night, 4-0-1 since that loss is UMass Lowell. UMass Lowell swept BU this weekend. How good are the Riverhawks?
Yeah, I'm impressed by them, Ed. I didn't know what to expect coming into this season. They lose one of their better players in Matt Brown, who transferred out. And wasn't the only transfer that they had, but they've shown that they've got some guts. And, obviously they may have gotten BU at a good time. BU has not been playing their best hockey of late. But they took it to them both nights, and that could have been a double shutout. Could have been both nights shutout. It was an extra attacker goal that BU scored on Saturday night just to make it a 2-1 game. But they're scoring goals. They're keeping opponents off the board. They're limiting the number of goals. I think that this team has a lot of upside. I don't know that I expected them to be this strong, but 4-1-1 right now, you can't take anything away from them. They'll play Long Island this Wednesday. That's a rescheduled game. They should have already played 2 more games. They had 2 games postponed because of COVID. And they're getting made up throughout the season. 1 this week and then 1, I think, in January against Long Island. But they could be 5-1-1 next weekend when they head in to face Northeastern and BC, 2 big league tests. But I like the Riverhawks right now.
Isn't that the kind of game that Norm Bazin really wants to play? They're playing his style of hockey.
Yeah, Norm's a good coach. He does a real good job. And obviously, getting to the Frozen Four and all the accolades he's gotten, they're best when they're playing tight checking, because you never really see that massive point producer. You see a lot of scoring by committee. You see a lot of tight checking games, and like you said, I think he really enjoys that.
Another team with just one loss is Penn State. They've played LIU and beat them twice. Split with Canisius, a pretty good Canisius team. That was in Hockey Valley. And also Niagara and a win over North Dakota, 2 against Niagara. And we'll talk more in just a moment about the North Dakota game in Nashville. But how about Guy Godowski's team? They tend to stack up usually a lot of home games, non-conference games early in the season. And they've won the ones that it looks like they should.
Yeah, and they do. They get a lot of home games early, and we were supposed to play them home and home. I think it ended up being an off weekend for them. But they've got they like to stay fairly local with their games, and they traveled. They got LIU at home. They had Canisius at home, Niagara. So once again, looking at those type of games, you potentially with those 6 home games could see yourself 5-1. And which is exactly where they were. They dropped 1, or maybe they even saw themselves at 6-0, but they made up for it by a massive win against North Dakota on the road in front of 14,000. I saw the tweets and everything. I think there were probably 13,000 people from North Dakota there, and probably 1,000 Penn State fans. But it was a green festival this week on Broadway. That's for sure.
I mean, that was my litmus test too. I've been trying to figure out where to put Penn State. Were they a top 20 team? Looking at their schedule, and again, I'm going back to you can only play who you're playing. But I think that Guy has always done a good job of front loading his schedule at home. His non-conference games, it's hard to get them to play outside of Hockey Valley, and there's a good reason. They pack the building every night. They get great revenue. They can pay teams to come in. But I looked at that North Dakota game as that was the one that was going to be their first test. They passed, and I think that is one of the things that, and it helped me, when I was putting my poll ballot together. I don't have them in the top 10 still. I mean, I'm not going to take them from an unranked team to top 10, but I know I had them around 16 in my poll ballot because I think that, they're a pretty deserved team. We'll watch them now and let's see where they go here. They're going to have to play, get into conference play now. They're going to have Ohio State for 2 this week out in Columbus, but then they get back home for Michigan. And those 4 games, I think we'll learn a lot about Penn State.
And they only have 4 non-conference games left, 2 of them at home against Maine, and then they got to go to St. Thomas. So if you're looking at 10 non-conference games, they're playing 8 of them at home. Or one, and I guess the one Hall of Fame game, so a technical neutral site game this past weekend that they played in. But once again, you can only win your games, and they're finding ways to win games. I think you're going to see, like you said, we'll find out more and more about them as they go. But pretty good showing for them so far as well.
It seems like North Dakota never really has a neutral site, or sometimes not even a road game. That's a fan base that can really travel. I've been when I've been on the road to broadcast and I've had night off, I've gone and seen, like, for instance, North Dakota at Colorado College, and there would be like twice as many North Dakota fans at World Arena than CC fans. And North Dakota is going to play Arizona State in Las Vegas next year. That seems like that's destined for a huge success with fan turnout. First of all, that fan base that travels, plus an Arizona State with a huge alumni base. It sounds like that'll be a success, but could anybody else really pull that off besides North Dakota?
I don't think so. You obviously got Minnesota and Wisconsin that do pretty well, and Michigan. We'll see how they show up at Little Caesars Arena when they play Michigan State. We'll see what kind of crowd that is there, because the GLI actually this year has moved to Michigan. It's not being played downtown, so it'll be we'll be able to see if there's any more teams that can travel that well. But the interesting thing about that is you talked about Arizona State's alumni base. If you watch them, and they played in our Three Rivers Classic a while ago, they travel very well. They've got alums all over the United States, and I think the interesting thing about that with the destination game of Vegas, and Arizona State's only 5 hours from Vegas. You're going to have people able to drive there. You're going to have people that from Arizona State. I think you might see, instead of more of a 80-20 split that potentially was in Nashville, I think you're going to see more of a 60-40 split, maybe even a 55-45 split. And that could be massive. I think that you're looking at a potential for getting the Golden Knights marketing people behind that. I think you're going to see a sold out house. And I know that I'm sure they're counting on that as well.
Yeah, I would say that that's almost a guarantee, and it'll be, scalpers heaven out in Las Vegas. This week in Nashville, the crowd was great, but it wasn't a sellout. So, there wasn't the high resale ticket price and that sort of stuff. I think that it's absolutely, when you look at the two teams here, you're going to see that. But I don't think that there's another team in college hockey like North Dakota that can pull the fan base. I kind of remember the days when Maine and Cornell would go down to Florida every Christmas and they'd play a Christmas tournament. In the early days of that, they'd put the 8,000-9,000 fans in the building. Then I think I went down probably around the 6th or 7th iteration of that tournament. And, it was freezing in the building because there was about 1,200 fans. Things wear off. And I think that North Dakota loves their destination games. Their fans do. And they've put them in great destinations. It's not like they're throwing them into, tiny cities that don't care. They're not putting them, they're not sending them to Seattle, and I'm not knocking Seattle. That's a great hockey market, but North Dakota fans have nothing in common with Seattle. They love Nashville. They love Vegas. I think this is at least the second time they've gone to Vegas. It might even be the third. And the other two were before the Golden Knights got there and the arena was built. They played at some of those old crappy buildings that were used.
Orleans,
the Orleans casino, which was, the nightmare stories you heard about that. But this will be successful. But I go back to the question, your original question: can another fan base do this? No way.
You got to find that intersection of gambling and country music in the fan base, then, right?
Branson, Missouri.
There you go. You got to build an arena in Branson and maybe draw an NHL team there.
Jimmy was he was really, really, really he went to the other end of the spectrum on that. He said, absolutely not. I was I was being politically correct on that one. I get texts from coaches all the time that listen to this. And Jimmy was absolutely not. I actually threw some out there that potentially could. I mean,
but you know what? I've seen them as the Minnesota fan base. I've seen the Wisconsin fan base. No way, not even close. I mean, listen, if it's a national championship, if it's a Frozen Four, I'll count on them being there. But I'm not sending those fans in the middle of football season, Big Ten football season, are not going to be traveling to a destination and filling a building. And, you threw Michigan State out. That's not a destination game. That's, people from Ann Arbor driving 8 miles down the road to go to a game, in Little Caesars. I just don't see any of these other teams, even as large as their fan bases are. I can't see anybody else bringing 13,000 fans to a city. I guess maybe I should bite my tongue here, because BU and Cornell do play that red hot hockey at Madison Square Garden every other year. And that one does do well, but that's also BU, Cornell, pretty close. You're talking a 4-hour ride for both. Could you move that entire game to Nashville and sell that one out? I don't know that you could.
Well, we're going to take a break here and come back with more. We're going to look at Michigan, Western Michigan, the opening of the season for the Ivies, and a benchmark record in men's Division I hockey that maybe a few years ago folks never thought would get broken. That's when USCHO Weekend Review continues.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Welcome back to USCHO Weekend Review. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly, Derek Schooley. Michigan now has lost a game each weekend over the last 2 weeks. Is there something that we can point to in the two losses that those two have in common? Is there a tendency or something about Michigan that people have found that they are vulnerable in?
Yeah, and I think Jimmy's got his theory, but I was at the Thursday game against Wisconsin, and I was really impressed with the pace of the game and the scoring chances. It was a wide open encounter. And I think it was a little bit more wide open than what Wisconsin wanted. And in the third period, it got a little bit more physical, a little bit more nasty. They relied on Jared Moe, who was outstanding. And Portillo had to make some big saves. But, I mean, we were talking 40, maybe 41 to 22, 23 in shots. And but I was really impressed with how they played. But you're also talking about a very young team. And I know that we talked before the show about 03s playing against 97s. And there were a couple of 03s for Michigan, 2 in the lineup. And I think Wisconsin got away from trying to skill the game and kind of got big and heavy. And Michigan, an older team as well, might have done that to them last weekend as well. And I think if you can play physical against them, that might be something that teams might try to do down the road, especially when you're not playing on an Olympic sheet like at Minnesota or a bigger sheet at Wisconsin. So I think when you're talking the inconsistency of youth, you might have to play physical against them. I will say this. I don't know if there's a better third line center in the nation than Garrett Van Wijn. He was first over he was their responsible penalty killer, face-off guy, played big, heavy minutes, didn't stop working. A former Army commit that ended up going to Michigan, but Garrett Van Wijn I was really impressed with him, and he came over the boards probably he went every other shift on penalty killing, and that's a little bit older, more of a 97 birth year presence that will help solidify that team. But very impressed with his play. And their D are just, Power and Blankenberg and Scott and Hughes. I mean, it's dynamic.
I think you hit on something there, Derek. You got to slow this Michigan team down, and if it's physical play, it's physical play. But you can't get into a track meet. And I go back to Red Berenson teams. You couldn't get into a track meet with them. That was one thing that they have always had, was that speed that goes along with some skill. And if you get into that track meet, but the one thing that you notice about the two losses at this point is the chasing the game. Michigan fell behind both weeks. To Western, it was 3-0. To Wisconsin on Saturday, it was 2-0. But, so I don't know that they're built, they can score quickly, but I'm not sure that they're built for comebacks. And I say that knowing that they can be explosive, but if you got a team that's maybe doing the right things through the neutral zone, making it a little bit more miserable for their offense to try to get going with any speed, and they're feeling the urgency to have to score because they're down 2 goals or they're down 3 goals, I think that's the formula. Listen, I guess there's no coach in the country that wouldn't like to have a 3-0 lead against anybody. But if you can make Michigan chase the game, that too, I think is a big, big part of it.
And I would say that I think that goes with youth, not starting on time. Sometimes you always say, when do you start? And game starts at 7, not 7:30. And sometimes maybe you get a little bit, behind because of youth. I would say there's only one team right now that wouldn't want a 3-0 lead or a 5-0 lead potentially. And we will go into that as Colgate.
Well, Colgate, what a comeback for Western Michigan against the Raiders on Friday. Colgate went out to a 5-0 lead late into the second period, and then off to the races was Western Michigan. Carter Guylander for Colgate made 47 saves in the loss. Brandon Busey was only called upon to make 20. He was called upon to make 25. He made 20. So heavily outshot was Colgate. But what do we take from that weekend? Kind of a high-scoring game on Friday, and then a game that went into overtime, a 2-1 win for Western Michigan. What do we take away from this weekend?
Well, I'm gonna take away that I shouldn't pump anybody's tires, because I gave Colgate as one of my surprises the week before, and then I looked at the box score. Then I went to the Red Wings game on Friday night, and I look at the box score, and I'm like, 5-0, right in the money. Look and see it's 6-5 final, and I was like, okay, I guess I jinxed them, and then for them to lose, and I did the same with Sacred Heart. So my teams that I was buying high on last week went 1-3. So I guess I should stay away from being a prognosticator. That's for sure. But that's a historic comeback. I mean, you see comebacks, 4-0 after one, or 3-0 midway, and 2 goals in the last minute to tie it and win in overtime. But I mean, you're talking a 5-0 lead with really 2 minutes left in the second period, and you get 2 to end there. And I mean, I would love to see that the box score, see when the timeouts were called and how they tried to manage that game, because it hats off to Western Michigan not quitting. It's easy really to pack it in when you're down 5-0, but that's a historic comeback for sure.
There's got to be something about the maturity too of Western, to be able to not just do it one night where it's, you're getting smoked and you really put together, one for the ages. But then the next night you fall behind again, you get into the third period and you have to find a way to tie the game. You do it again, and then you win in overtime. I mean, the confidence that Western has to leave upstate New York with, it has to be enormous. The one thing that I keep thinking is how many psychiatrists that Donnie Vaughn has to have into his program, this week to deal with this team. I mean, where does that leave you, Derek, when you basically feel like you definitely had a win, and then a second game that we probably should have won and we end up losing? I mean, you reverse the order of those 2 games, it doesn't help. I mean, both mentally, can destroy a team over a long season.
And then we'll see where they are. I mean, Donnie's been doing this a long time, and like you said, that's a tough one to overcome, and we'll see how they move forward, because they have put together a really good start. And I don't think anybody would have said, if you would have said at the beginning of the weekend that Western Michigan was going to go to Colgate and win 6-5 and then 2-1 in overtime, you wouldn't have been surprised at Western Michigan. I think how we're surprised is how it actually happened. And that's a tough one, because you got to come out and you've got to be able to show the balance of video without demoralizing their team. And you've got to move on quick from it, because you don't have time to, that's a in the coach's office, that's an, oh my God, what just happened? Now we've got to build on our guys and try to get them back. But hats off to them though, for coming off and playing a pretty good game on Saturday. I mean, because that could have just continued to go south in a hurry. But I'm sure there's a lot of questions being asked this week.
The one thing too, I think that you'll also see the maturity of this team is how much fire they now will have in their belly as they get into ECAC play. Does this maybe make them hungrier, knowing that you took a really good team, into situations that you should have come out with, 2 wins? You don't get either win. You might feel horrible, but should this put some fire in your belly as well?
Well, and I think you also have to maybe go back and look at these games. I didn't watch either one of these. The Saturday game, shots were 40-19 in favor of Western Michigan. Mitch Benson was in net the second night, made 38 saves. It probably didn't feel like it was that close of a game, and probably felt more like, man, we are doing everything we can to keep Western off the board.
Well, I would love to go back and look at the box. I would, but there were a whole bunch of boxes this week that didn't even pop up. I mean, on multiple different sites, and I'm gonna leave my rant on. We need to fix these scenarios really quick, because I think we're going to be waning some interest right now in college hockey of people that look at scores and get frustrated. But you look at those, and sometimes you go, those are games you should steal. And we yesterday, Halloween, 6 years ago, we were at Michigan and ended up winning 4-0 and outshot Michigan on that night. The bigger one was the night before. We were up 4-2 going in the third period, and we outshot them that game too. And Zach Rowinski kind of took over the third period. We ended up losing 6-4 with an empty netter. And you walk out of there and you go, that was our night. That was our chance. And thank God our big mature team at that time with a whole bunch of seniors rallied behind, and we beat them 4-0 the next day. Sometimes you, as a coach, you go, that was our chance. And Western obviously is ranked fairly high. Colgate's trying to establish himself. That they looked at it, maybe they looked at it as that their chance, but the players didn't, and they responded pretty well in game 2. But they had a chance to steal both. They walked out of there with overtime loss when they had a chance really to get a sweep.
Well, let's take a look at the Ivies. They got underway this past week, and you talk to the Ivy League coaches, all of them would like to play a 34-game schedule instead of a 29-game one. But because of the late start, they're just getting underway. We talked last week to Ted Donato, and I know he probably felt pretty good about his team, but was anybody expecting a 9-2 win over Dartmouth and then 7-3 against Bentley, a good Bentley team that had the night off the night before?
I was pleased with Harvard's performance, but I didn't expect 16 goals either. I thought that Ted Donato actually, sounded very confident. It sounded like he's had kind of the game plan of what to do with a lot of players that left, due to the taking a year off of the pandemic. But he also knew that he had some players in that locker room that were hungry to play hockey, and they showed it this weekend. I mean, those are 2 dominating wins. And, like we said, Bentley is a team that we know can be good. We've seen them beat Ohio State. We've seen them beat Boston College. So when I, flipped up the score on Saturday night and it was 7-1 in the third, I said, whoa, wow, this is a game that kind of got away from Bentley, but wow, Harvard is good. This is an offense that's going to be pretty good. I think that of the 6 Ivies, this might be the best one out there.
Yeah. And you're talking that these teams haven't played in close to, I think it was 600 days. Something to that effect. And that's a long time to be able to keep your players motivated, and the enthusiasm that they must have had to go back out, and new teams because people left. And, you saw Cornell get their first 2 overtime wins in a long time. You saw Brown get a 2-0 win over Yale. I mean, these are teams that had to be hungry to play hockey because it's been so long since they've played. And, what a good showing, because that could have been another feather in the cap for Atlantic hockey for Bentley to be able to do that, and Harvard didn't even let them in the game.
Meanwhile, Cornell got underway. It was 2 overtime wins, 3-2 on Friday and 1-0 on Saturday, sweeping Alaska.
This is a Cornell team that I know has high expectations. We'll see where they fit into the mix. I'm not sure exactly where they are yet. And they're another team that lost a lot of players when the season was canceled last year. So let's see where they fit. But overtime wins, I think, are some of the most exciting things you can have in hockey. So to do it twice in the same week, and if that doesn't pump up your locker room a little bit, it certainly is going to be a lot nicer going to practice today than it would have been if even if those games, non-conference games, they could have ended in ties. You could have had 2 ties out of the weekend. It wouldn't be as much fun in the locker room today.
Well, I don't know about that. I spent I played for Coach Schaefer, worked for him, and was on the tournament committee with him. And he was anti 3-on-3, anti shootout. He's anti everything. He always that there are good ties out there. So as much as the players are probably excited about, he's probably he would have probably been okay with the tie. But no, all kidding aside, I'm sure that Mike had them fired up and ready to go. And he shows why there is high expectations for them. But no, it's been an interesting first month of college hockey now that we're into November. That's for sure. And I'm gonna give my one. I've been holding it off this whole time. I'm going back. We need to get college hockey stats back. If there's a tweet every week, if there's from everybody involved. This was the lifeblood of college hockey coaches, looking at lines, looking at stats, looking at everything. And I've got more people that they think I've got a massive platform now I'm the voice of college hockey here, and to be able to champion the cause back. But you saw some tweets this week, and it's been a month without us, and I don't know how we get Tim back in the mix, but it's making coaches' jobs harder, and it's making me as now part of the per se media to find box scores and all that stuff. And there's got to be some site and somebody that would want to take it over and just kind of replicate it from Tim.
And not only is the front end a problem on that, the back end is even more of a problem. Getting reliable data from the new data supplier continues to be a nightmare. I know the folks at Sidearm Stats who produce a lot of the college sports websites have been having trouble. You see things like more shots on goal than shots attempted. You see a period where shots on goal are listed as 52 to 46. There's a continuous thing. Trying to even get reliable stats at a game during a game is proven to be almost impossible.
I'm sick of trying to develop box scores at 11 o'clock on Saturday night by using Twitter accounts.
I mean, we're in 2021, almost 2022. I mean, we took a small, like Tim did this for a long time and took it wasn't like it was real. It's not like it's a real complicated system. I mean, it's just that it was done so well and so perfect. And now we've taken it to this massive conglomerate that I want to use a different word, but the level of concern it doesn't seem to be like very, very high to get this fixed. And it needs to be fixed, because I'm just afraid that you're going to see people lose interest in checking college hockey scores. And obviously we do it because we're a part of it, but the random fan, if they can't get scores, they're not going to go to Twitter and go deep dive like you talked about, Jimmy, to try to get this. So there's got to be something. And hopefully we don't have to talk about this at the end of November too.
I want to add one more thing to today's show, and that is Dryden McKay. Now, the last guy to win a Hobey Baker Award as a goaltender was Ryan Miller. And we've talked for years, for 20 years, that in order to be the Hobey winner as a goalie, especially now with a Richter Award, you need Ryan Miller type of numbers. Well, McKay had those kind of numbers last year for Minnesota State. And now this weekend, he eclipsed Ryan Miller's career record of 26 shutouts with his 27th.
Wow. That's all I have to say. That's a massive number. You would think I don't know. We had our program for 18 years. I don't know if we had 27 shutouts in 18 years. I mean, those are numbers that I would have a hard time seeing. But then again, I didn't think they would be eclipsed again. But it's going to be a while. So congratulations to him. And the thing is, he's not done. No, he's not done.
I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes this season, with maybe as much as 8 to 10 more shutouts, and he could get that number up to 37 easily. And, that's just slaughtering a record. But, my whole thing, and this is kind of one of those hills I'll die on, is we have to respect the position more. He didn't even win the Richter Award last year, and his numbers were the best in college hockey. And, I get it that there's some high profile schools that have goaltenders that are going to head to the NHL. And this is a guy that decided to come back for his fourth year instead of going to the NHL. He's going to play in the NHL. Let's face it. He's a good goaltender. I don't care what league he's playing against, who he's playing against on a night in, night out basis. We know this is a team that has been the number one team in the country. They were in the Frozen Four last year. They played an unbelievable game. He had some great saves along the way. We've got to find a way to recognize this kid. He is unbelievable. And I think that it's when he graduates, then I think maybe we'll realize what a treasure we had. But I hope that he gets some recognition, national recognition this year. If he stays healthy and puts up these numbers all year, get him a Hobey Baker Award, get him a Richter Award. He deserves both.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because of the obviously Mike Hastings and their staff doing a really good job playing tight defensive? You think that he doesn't get enough credit because of the system they play? I'm asking for an outsider's perspective.
I've had people come up to me, and I'm in the Hockey East world, and I've had somebody come up and say, "Oh, but he played this was last year. He played in the WCHA. You got Spencer Knight's playing in Hockey East. He's playing so many great teams." I don't care. You can only play where you play, but if you're putting up numbers that are better than any numbers that have been posted in years, then you deserve recognition. And he's playing still very tough teams and shutting them out. Let's not forget that, shutting them out. He's winning games 1-0 for that team against nationally ranked opponents. And that happens often. It's not like it's a fluke. They're playing good teams. They're beating them. He's the reason they're beating them so many nights.
And is that the same? Are those the same people that criticized the NCAA tournament committee last year for putting 3 WCHA teams in?
Probably.
Did pretty good, didn't we? Bemidji they did well.
And this year it's going to be a tougher go in the new CCHA for McKay also. And look who Minnesota State has already played. So I think that argument's going to be thrown out the window this year as to competition. Well, maybe it will be. I don't know. There's still so much parochialism and regionalism in college hockey where the fans of the NCHC think nobody else can play good hockey, and the fans of Hockey East look down their nose at other leagues. You got to look at the whole national scene. We hope we're kind of bringing that to light a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's 100% on the money. This is a good league. This isn't like that. They went to the Final Four. He took his team to the Final Four. It's not like he just went out and randomly just started throwing up zeros against Little Sisters of the Poor. I mean, he did a good job. And you're right, Jimmy. He deserves credit.
Well, we'll see how it goes when the committees meet. There's a lot of hockey to be played. But I think we'll wrap things right there. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.